Nobody wakes up and says, I want to do porn today. The things that I was seeing, I just was like, I can't do that. I officially lost my virginity at 12 years old. My mom didn't know, nobody knew that I was pregnant. When the baby died in my arms, that's when something shifted in me. So I went and got me a fake ID and I started stripping. I was bamboozled because it had nothing to do with dancing. One young lady looked me up and down. She said, have you ever considered doing porn? I was ready for my first scene. That first, you never forget the first, but what it cost me did not compare to the checks that were being written to me. Now I'm with rappers and football players and basketball players and mega preachers. There was this one particular man who contacted me. He took me to this house and it looked like a dungeon. And he said something to me that shook me to my core. And that was my breaking point.
So tell us about what it was like growing up on the West Coast.
Born and raised in LA, all over LA, but primarily Compton with my grandparents. So the testimony, obviously, like you said, from porn to the pulpit. And most people, when they say that, they get different feelings, you know, different emotions and different opinions. But I always say, there's always a story and a reason why certain people make certain decisions. Nobody wakes up, not that I've ever met in my lifetime. No one ever wakes up and says, I want to do porn today. I want to be a crackhead today. I want to, you know, there are things that take place in people's lives. So before I ever touched a porn set or before I ever went into a strip club, I was a little girl. I was a little girl who had been molested by my babysitter's son when I was 8 years old. My father had primary custody of me. I was a daddy's girl. Like, me and my dad were like this, but my dad had some issues. He had some mental health issues on top of alcoholism. And so my father had like a bipolar or schizophrenic outbreak. And he tried to kill me. He tried to beat me halfway to death and then tried to drown me in a bathtub when I was 10 years old.
So before you even got to that point, you know, was your mother around at all? Like, what was the relationship dynamic with your mother and father?
So in the beginning, so I grew up in a very volatile environment. My mother and father were very violent towards each other, even in divorce. And so typically with children, they normally go with mom or split down the middle. But my dad was like, you can leave, but my daughter gonna stay here. So I stayed with my dad. And so my dad had primary custody. I was with my dad all the time. We were thick as thieves. And so you can only imagine how detrimental it was to me emotionally and mentally to see my hero trying to kill me. You know, outside of his alcoholism and his mental health issues, he also was a womanizer. So at a young age, I thought it was normal for men to have multiple women. I thought it was normal for men to beat women because if daddy was doing it, it got to be okay. You know, that's why I always tell parents, watch what you're doing in front of your kids because we're soaking up every little thing. Everything. The good and the bad. And so early, I thought that dysfunction was normal. And so 10 years old, dad tried to kill me. After that, I kind of bounced around from family to family until ultimately I ended up in LA with my mom. And that relationship was a little strained in the beginning. She's my best friend now, but at that time, you know, it was strained. All I wanted was my dad. Even after he violated me, I still wanted my father. Rebellious with my mom. And I remember just doing my own thing. One day I ended up coming home early. She wasn't there. I didn't have my keys. And there was a neighbor across the street, you know, family friend, Uncle so-and-so.
Okay.
And I was waiting outside and he came out and he was like, what's going on? I said, I'm locked out the house. And he said, well, you can come in my house and wait for me. And so this man that I had trusted, this man I was familiar with, invited me into his home and he raped me when I was 12.
Wow.
Never said anything because an abuser's objective is to instill fear, you know, and make you feel like you're guilty for somebody else's wrongdoing. And so I didn't tell anybody. A year later, I was at a bus stop. And this fine young gentleman had pulled up. And he was the finest man I had ever seen in my life. Mind you, I'm 13. And he was an older man in a nice car. Pulled into the gas station and he showed interest. And I didn't know that he was a pimp. And so I had started dealing with him and I had sex one time at 13 years old and I got pregnant by this 27-year-old pimp.
To all my soldiers, we are knee deep in spiritual warfare and Hardly Initiated has created some additional armor for the fight. The Fight the Flesh bracelet is a stylish reminder to stay disciplined in the face of battle and temptation. So click the link in the description and get yours today. And don't forget, use code CLIPS for 10% off. Let's fight.
And I was thinking in my young, immature mind that this older man liked me and he wanted me. And the whole time he just wanted to pimp me. But at that time, for whatever reason, I had some sense and didn't do it.
Okay, this is a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, I ain't even halfway through, right?
So at 8 years old, I want to go back a bit. At 8 years old, the sexual assault at 8 years old.
Yes.
That was, you were in custody of your
babysitter.
Okay. Your father, you was in custody of your father, and it was a babysitter.
Yes.
I'm sure someone that, your father at the time trusted. Was that the first time you were introduced to any sort of sexual experience?
Correct. I was 8 years old. And what was interesting, it's like the devil had a target on me at a young age because it was a daycare. And so it was other kids there, but for whatever reason, I was his pick. So the babysitter had a son around 13, 14 years old. He was a teenager. And, you got to run errands, go get food, go get this, whatever. And so when she would leave, he was old enough to watch the kids. And so when mom would leave, he would bring me into his room and he would stick toys in me. He would stick his fingers in me. And he told me if I ever told anybody, he would kill me or they wouldn't believe me. And every time.
And how old was he?
He was about 13 or 14 and I was 8.
I mean,
it makes you wonder. Now
it does, because he probably had some similar experiences, but in general, a young man going through adolescence, hormones raging around little girls is never a recipe for it, no matter how good the kid is.
Absolutely.
No, I get it. I mean, but it's levels to wickedness. I mean, at 13 years old,
wow,
I'm sure he got a little wild story too, because for those thoughts to be roaming around your mind at 13 is wild.
Now, I want to touch on this because, we've had people to share their testimony and, talk about the sexual assault. But one thing I don't think we've dug into is what the fallout is from the parents and the family friends. So after that happened, did you go back to your father and express, what happened? And if so, what was his reaction to that?
No, I never told anybody about the abuse. I never told anybody. Again, an abuser's objective is to instill fear and fault, make you feel like it's your fault, put fear in you that if you tell somebody, they either won't believe you or if you tell somebody, they're going to harm you. So I had that instilled in my mind that if I say something, it's going to go bad. So I never told anybody. I didn't tell anybody about the babysitter son. I didn't tell anybody about the neighbor. Wow. And I had to look at both of them for quite some time, and I just had to hold this in my heart.
Was there any resentment building at that time?
Of
your father and your mother at that time?
Not yet. Not in that particular moment. I think I had resentment once my dad did what he did.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I was still, so this is where rejection came, and I noticed that it affected relationships later on. And even, I think I just broke free from this, but the spirit of rejection, because even though my father had violated me, I still was a daddy's girl. I still wanted him. I still didn't see, you ever seen a little kid, they mama a crackhead or their daddy is don't want nothing to do, but they still, my mama, my daddy, my mama. It's because it doesn't matter how old you get or what they do. Every child wants their parent, until they build up that wall, that resentment later. And so even though he did that to me, I still wanted my daddy, and he didn't want me. And so I remember I would call him to come get me, and I would tell him to come get me, and everything is cool, and I'm sorry, and apologizing for what he did to me, and he would never come get me after that. And I noticed in relationships later and friendships later, anytime I felt like they were pulling away or they were going to leave me, I automatically go into this almost begging you to stay. And then later on in ministry, it's like a red flag. If you say you leaving me or you going to walk away from me, it does something to me because it takes me all the way back to my childhood. So that's where the rejection came in, because my dad left me and I didn't know why, and so it just opened up a door to so much.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
And before the night of where your dad pretty much attempted to murder you, was there any, like when you look back at it, were there any signs or, certain things going on where you kind of felt like, okay, he's not really there mentally? You know, is something going on emotionally where he can kind of be a little finicky, or was it a complete surprise when?
I think I was surprised that he did it to me. I saw him beat every woman in his life. Like I saw, y'all know that scene on What's Love Got to Do with It when Ike was dragging Tina down the hallway and the kids was right. Like that's what I used to see. We had a long hallway in Carson, California. Shout out to California. We praying for my city while it's burning. But we had a long hallway, and I recall my father pulling a young lady by her hair down the hallway while I was in my room, and she had just got her hair done, and he put her head in the toilet, you know, like, and I watched this and I witnessed this. And so every time I saw him flip out or saw him abusive, it was always towards someone else. It had never been towards me. So he was a horrible man, but he was a great dad. Horrible man, but a great dad, like very involved with my schooling, had me in activities, and very like homework, sit down with me, do homework, like always had me with him in the front seat. Like we were like this. And so I saw his behavior on other people, but when it was turned on me, it blew me. Yeah.
Man, so do you feel like what you saw had a lot to do with you ending up in the car with that pimp when he pulled up?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
At that point, you were sexually exposed.
Not that much.
Okay. Okay.
I officially lost my virginity at 12 years old. I'm not proud of it, but I was a willing participant because I don't consider what the babysitter's son did. If you were molested and somebody broke your hymen, I don't consider that to be your first sexual experience. That was your first violation. So even though the babysitter's son started at 8 years old, I didn't become a willing participant until I was 12. And I had only had sex. Yeah.
Right, at 12.
Yeah, you didn't force me to do it.
Right.
Yeah. And so, and I had only had sex one time at 12 willingly. And then I met the pimp and I had sex with him one time and got pregnant.
And at 12, the first time, you know, you losing your virginity, was that a young adolescent boy or was that an adult male as well?
He was 18.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot of older guys here.
Older. Yeah.
Yeah.
Always. After the split with my dad, it was like that's what I started drawing to. Older.
So go ahead.
And, well, because you hear that from women, you know, dealing with older men. And I think that now goes into the gender dynamic when adult men saying they want to deal with younger adult women. Now I think a lot of it is because, you know, women have been abused as adolescents and they're dealing with these 18-year-olds, 21-year-olds and so forth. With those men, did you at that time, I mean, like looking back at it, did they do anything that was specifically predatory? Like did they, you know, do things to lure you in? Like what was the interaction like for them, you know, for you to lay with them at some point?
I don't believe that I was lured. I believe that I thought that they actually cared. I believe that I had this teenage young girl's mentality that when a man shows you interest, you think that he genuinely likes you. A lot of young ladies and even old women, you know, they say we got old fools, you know. A lot of, I don't think it has anything to do with age. I think it has to do with experience and maturity. But a lot of times when a man shows you interest, women think, oh, he likes me, he loves me, this is genuine, and he got a whole different agenda. And so for me, I think when they showed interest, I didn't think that it was anything attached to it. Yeah. I later found out.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now, I mean, you're pregnant by a pimp.
Yes.
That's 27 years old. What happens from here? What happens, you know, with your now upcoming baby and everything else?
Okay, I'm 13 years old in the 8th grade. I'm hiding my pregnancy. My mom didn't know. Nobody knew that I was pregnant. I went up until, I think the first time when I told him we had scheduled an abortion, I went into that clinic and I sat there. And when I was sitting there, I just was like, I can't do that. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. The people was outside picketing, you know, the pro-life people were picketing. It was like everything, all the noise just stopped. Everything around me was just weird. Like the movies, you know, when you just don't hear anything, but you see movement. And I was sitting in that lobby waiting to go to the back, and I'm seeing moms come out. I'm seeing women rolled out in wheelchairs. I'm seeing the people outside with their pick. And I just ran out of there. And I think at that point, I was probably early in the pregnancy, like 2 or 3 months. And I ran out of it. And again, being a 13-year-old little girl, I thought if you ignored it, it'll go away.
Wait, was he in there with you?
No, he didn't. He was supposed to take me, and he didn't answer the phone. So I got on the bus and went myself.
At 13?
At 13, skipped school. He was supposed to pick me up down the street from my school. He didn't come. I called him from a payphone. If you watch, y'all was waiting on you. He never showed up. So I just jumped on the bus and went myself. And I'm sitting in that lobby, and I couldn't do it. Jumped on the bus. I left. 13 years old, thinking if I don't think about it, it's going to go away. If I don't acknowledge it, it's going to go away. But Tyshawn, that's not how pregnancy works. You don't have to take a pill. You don't have to go to the doctor. That baby's still growing. And so 3 months turned into 6 months. And I don't know what happened on this particular day, but I had decided on this particular day, February 20th, 2003, I had decided that I was going to keep my baby. My mom dropped me off at school, and the clinic was down the street from my school. I waited for my mom to drive off. I went to the clinic, and I told the nurse who had told me I was pregnant a couple of months ago. I told her, I said, I don't know how far along I am. I'm pretty sure I'm far, but I'm ready to start prenatal care because I decided I'm gonna keep the baby. I'm gonna tell my mom I'm gonna keep it, but I need to start getting ready.
They still didn't know at this point.
Nobody knows I'm 6 months pregnant. Wow. And so I tell the nurse, I'm like, yeah, I'm ready to I'm ready to start taking care of myself, whatever. She examines me. She's like, you're about 23 weeks pregnant. I'm finna get your prenatal, get your blood work. I'm sitting in the lobby. While I'm sitting in the lobby, there's this sharp pain that hits me in my back. I go to stand up to get the nurse, and blood and water just flows out of me. My water breaks, full of blood. The lady comes rushing out. They call the ambulance. I'm taken to the hospital. The nurse is in there telling me, you in labor. You finna have this baby. I'm like, no, I'm trying to rip IVs out of my arms. I'm like, no. They're like, we got to call your mom. I'm like, no, it's getting late. I got to go home, thinking I can get on the bus and go home. Just young and dumb. And the police come in. Social workers are like, you cannot leave. You're going to have the baby. Who can we call? I said, call my granny. Call my granny. And my mom happened to be at my grandparents' house.
Wow.
And the nurse calls my grandmother and says, hey, I need you to come up to the hospital. Fast forward a couple of hours, my mom and my grandma came in there, and it was time for me to push. They told me that he was going to be a stillborn, but when I pushed him, the baby was very much alive. It was a boy, and so they tried to save him, and they was like, nah, it's no way. They brought the baby back to me. The baby was still breathing. He was moving slowly. You can see him gasping for air. And in my mind, I thought he was gonna be okay. I think he was holding on because when I said I love you and I kissed him, it was like he was waiting for that moment. He smiled and he took his last breath. When the baby died in my arms, that's when something shifted in me. So everything that I had suppressed at 8 years old with the babysitter son, everything that I had suppressed with my dad trying to kill me at 10, everything that I suppressed at 12 with the neighbor, the pimp, baby daddy, something shifted. So the same little girl that went into the hospital wasn't the same little girl that came out. And that's when the floodgates of hell opened up in that moment. I think a piece of me, my innocence, the little innocence that I had left, it died with the baby.
Wow.
It's the most traumatic event that happened to you at such a young age.
13 years old.
13. 5 days before my birthday. I had him February 20th, 2003. My birthday was February 25th. So for years, I was so depressed. I used to have to, oh yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah, so I carried that. So then I leave the hospital. And I'm on go now. I'm rebellious. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I'm broken. I feel like now it's my parents' fault. Now this is where when you said, did you have any feelings towards them? That now I'm mad at the world. Now is my mom. I don't want to hear what my mama got to say. Now it's my daddy's fault. I'm not listening to my grandparents. I'm doing what I want to do. So I end up running away. And I end up running away to this man. He was a drug dealer, and he was a pimp. When I got to him, ironically, he wasn't trying to pimp me when I got there.
And how did you know these? How did you know these? Like associate with these people?
Because I knew somebody that knew him.
Okay.
And I had met him through her a couple of times, and he liked me. And so when I ran away, I went to the girl's house, and then we went over to his house, and he was like, well, you could stay here, and I started living with a stranger. And ironically, even though I knew he was a drug dealer, I knew he was a pimp, he didn't try to pimp me. So I'm like, oh, this is the first man that's, nice to me. Well, they say you ain't supposed to get high on your own supply. Mm-hmm. He must didn't hear that rule, because he would get high. And when he would get high off of cocaine, it was like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. So this nice man that had welcomed me into his house and had been taking care of me and been this great person in my eyes, when he got high, he wanted to have sex. And I didn't want to have sex because we didn't have that type of dynamic. You were just a friend helping me out. So I didn't look at him in that way. And so when he got high, he wanted to have sex. And I'm like, nah. And so he would beat me. We would fight. We would go toe to toe. We would fight all the time. Every time he was high, and I'm beat up, I'm bloody. And then when his high was gone, when he was sober again, he's back to being nice. And so this is what I would have to deal with every couple of days. Well, he had a customer who was a dancer, and she would come to the house once a week to buy ecstasy. Well, she would buy cocaine and weed. And she came to the house one day, and I was all beat up and stuff. And she said, girl, you ain't got to take this. You can, I'm like, well, where I'm going to go? He take care of me. I ran away from home, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, well, you can come to the club with me and make your own money, and you ain't got to deal with this. So in her mind, she was helping me.
Right.
She was helping me get away from this abusive man, but really it just opened up Pandora's box. So again, I'm from LA. You can get anything in LA. You know what I'm saying? So I went and got me a fake ID, and I started stripping at 14 years old in the nightclubs with this young lady. Yeah.
And that's just a lot. Like, was that common? Was there other young women your age in those clubs doing the same thing?
Probably. Yeah.
And nobody really cared. Like,
you show the bouncer your ID, that's good enough for them, And so I started stripping at 14, and she was right. I started making money, and again, money to me at 14 was $200, but this is back in the early 2000s too. So, getting on stage and coming off with $200 at 14 and only being on stage for 5 to 8 minutes, that was a lot of money to me.
Right.
And so, she was right. I was making money, but I still was a little girl in a grown woman's world. And so the things that I was seeing in the club, the stuff that I was seeing in the champagne room, the stuff I was seeing in the dressing room, I just wasn't ready for it. Like, I wasn't ready to fill those shoes. You know what I'm saying? And so I did it for a couple of weeks until I was like, yeah, nah, this ain't for me.
And these adults that are around, because I'm sure, I understand you had a fake ID, but I'm sure, people peep game with what's going on.
Yeah.
What were they just completely ignored it?
Every man for themselves. Oof. Yeah, every man for themselves. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so
I can only imagine what that was. I mean, I cannot imagine what that was like actually at 14 seeing that.
Yeah,
I can't
wasn't
even
ready
imagine what
for
that's
it.
like as an adult.
Was you still in school?
Ready for it.
Were you still in school as well?
I had ran away. No, I wasn't in school at this time.
Okay.
But yeah, I wasn't ready for it. Even the men, she told me we were dancing. So, most men come to the club for more than just a dance. And I wasn't prepared for none of that, but that's what was happening. I wasn't prepared to be back there watching girls sniff coke and pop pills and shoot heroin. I wasn't prepared for pimps to be out there arguing over. I wasn't ready for it then. And so I decided I wasn't going to do it no more. So I go home to my grandparents in Compton. And I thank God for them, because if you're going to be in grandma and granddaddy house, you going to church. Like, okay. they Southern Baptists from Birmingham, Alabama. I don't know how they ended up in Compton, but they came from Birmingham, and they are Southern Baptists. And if you're going to be in their house, you going to church.
And there was no question asked. They just...
No, you hear, okay, you be going back to school. So I got back in school, was in church all day, every day, got me a summer job, was doing good. I was doing good. I was back on the right track. But again, you got to go to church. And it seems like it seemed like I was at church. I should have been a preacher. I should have been up there doing Bible study as much as I was in the church. It was like I was there all the time, and I had decided, like, if I'm gonna be here as much, I might as well do something I enjoy. And at that time, I used to love to sing. End up joining the youth choir at my church. Again, I'm doing well. Everything is balanced. I got stability. I'm back, where I should be as a 15-year-old child. In the choir, singing for Jesus, befriend my choir member. My choir member introduced me to prostitution.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, how old was this person?
18.
And it's a young lady.
Young lady.
And she's already
in the choir.
In the choir.
And she's actively a prostitute.
Actively a prostitute in the choir. In the choir.
That's just mind
Was this
blowing.
not known? Was this not known?
No. Nobody knew.
And what do you think she saw? Because, what did she see in you? Because I'm sure she's just not asking every.
I want to know that too. That's a good question.
Like, what did she see on you where she was comfortable enough to say,
question.
"Hey, what's up?"
Great question. So, familiar spirits, I guess. We became friends, and when you become friends with people, you start confiding in them. You talk to them. So I had told her, I used to dance, and she said, "Me too. I still dance." She was like, and I was like, "You dance? Not you singing for Jesus? Not you sounding up here looking like little Tamala man up here? Like, I know you ain't dancing, And so she was like, "Yeah, I still don't tell nobody, but yeah, I still dance, and I live by myself, and yeah, I love God, but I get my money." And she said, "Why did you stop?" And I told her, I said, I wasn't ready for that, and I'm back with my grandparents, and they ain't going for that. And she was like, "Well, I live by myself. You can live with me, and you can dance with me." So I ran away from stability. I ran away from a safe haven with my grandparents. I ran away from comfort and safety, and ran away again with my choir member.
Staying with her.
Start staying with her, but I was bamboozled because it had nothing to do with dancing. It had nothing to do with stripping. I don't even think we went to the strip club together, as a matter of fact. When I got there, we were there for a few days. That's when the introduction of cocaine was introduced to me. And she loosened me up, made me comfortable for a few days. And then the conversation was had, ain't no money in the clubs. I'm like, "What you mean ain't no money in the clubs? I just had made some money. I just left the club, And she said, "Well, real money, is between your legs. You're going to have to, do a little bit of extra if you want more money." And I basically, you got to prostitute yourself. And she had tricks, clients, customers, whatever you want to call them, lined up. And before I know it, she told me to sniff some coke and take a few drinks, and I'll be able to do it. And she was right. I sniffed some coke, I took a few drinks, and I was able to do it.
At 14 years old still?
15.
It's 15. Now, let's backtrack a little. Oh my gosh,
this is crazy.
Yeah, let's backtrack a little bit. So she makes you this offer.
Yeah.
And says, "Hey, let's pretty much work together."
Yes.
Now, what about that life was attractive to you to even go back to it?
I guess freedom. She lived on her own. Nobody, I'm living with my grandparents. She had a nice car. She had a nice apartment out in the valley, which was getting burnt up right now.
Right.
So she was out in the hills, and she was by herself. So I thought, and so I'm like, all right, I can go back to it. And I didn't have to worry about no man beating me. See, when I ran away the first time with the first guy, he would get high and I had to fight and do all that. Well, her, she my homegirl, so it's going to be a different vibe. And it just was freedom. It was a sense of trust that opened that door for me.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And okay.
Because, she's in the choir with me, of course.
Yeah. And,
of course you're gonna trust your choir. Remember, we up here singing about Jesus, and now you got me sniffing coke.
Right.
It happened so fast, but there was no guard up because I met her in the house of God, not realizing the biggest devils are in the
devil's got
Absolutely.
folks evangelizing in the church.
You hear me?
They do. Now you said something very interesting. Her response to you was, "I love God. I just
God.
also strip." Now, did you
Get money.
And
You
get
know,
money?
get money.
Right. She was doing other stuff. I was
Yeah.
not tripping. Did you consider yourself a Christian at that time?
I did.
And so did she.
And so did she. And so do many.
That's a whole conversation.
So do many believe that they are a Christian and live a totally alternative lifestyle. Because I love God should be enough for me to do whatever I want to do. No conviction, no relationship, just religion. Your religion says Christian, but you have no relationship. So that was my religion. That was her religion, but we had no relationship.
Wow. And first off, we're going to table that because that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, I know
too,
it is.
about
Yeah,
right?
no, facts. No,
About
it really was.
These alternative lifestyle, double lifestyle Christians out there.
How can you identify that though? Like for people that might be in these situations, because to think that the church is supposed to be the safe place for you, you know, like the place for you to ascend to the saint, you know, not necessarily for you to go even lower, you know, into hell. So how can somebody identify that they might be either dealing with the wrong crowd or the wrong community, you know, in a space like church? Like, what should they identify?
You can identify anything that goes against God's will. You don't need to be there. Anybody or anything that goes outside of the will of God, it's a wolf in sheep clothing. One thing about it, the Bible does not leave us ignorant. It tells us about false prophets. It tells us about wolves in sheep clothing. It tells us to not be deceived. It tells us all of the devil comes in as an angel of light and all of that. So we know them by their fruit. So if you an orange tree, I shouldn't be tasting pears. If you a watermelon tree, I shouldn't be tasting avocados. You know what I'm saying? We know them by their fruit. And if your fruit is not in my faith, then I don't need to be connected.
Okay. There you have it.
And it's more. It's more because, you know, you dealing with this young lady. She introduced you to prostitution.
And drugs. I wasn't doing drugs.
That's a big part, though.
Yeah.
Right.
Drugs is a big part.
Of the lifestyle in general.
In general, yeah.
Now, it even feels weird for me to ask you this question, but the first experience where you in this transactional situation,
Okay.
what was that like? What was that like? Like, how was that even? How? Because I get she says it, you see it, you see these clients, you know what has to be done, but put it together. Like, how does it go from that to actually in right there in front of you?
The first client.
Right.
I'll never forget it. I don't think you ever forget your first anything. I'll never forget it. And her prostitution was not low key. It was like on the corner. Yeah, like on the corner at night in the cold.
Wow.
And so she said, just stand here like you would stand at a bus stop. And I said, okay. And it actually was a bus stop right there. So she said, just stand here like you at the bus stop and let them do the rest. And you get in, and she gave me all the instructions, and you do this, and here, gave me a little pocket knife in case somebody's crazy, yada, yada, yada. And so I was, I believe I was on Sherman Oaks Boulevard, and it was late at night, and I had this little stupid skirt on and this raggedy wig. And I was just standing there kind of walking back and forth, pacing really, like I can't believe that this was going. And cars just kept passing. I was like, thank God, nobody stopping. You know, I was hoping that nobody would stop. And right when I was finna be like, girl, it's cold, I'm finna go back, the first car pulls up. The car pulls up, and the area that I'm in is a very rich area. So I believe it was a BMW or a Mercedes or something like that. And I opened the door. It was a non-black male, because she told me we don't deal with our kind because it might be a pimp or a police officer. So don't get in the car with our kind. So this man was of a different race. And I couldn't even open the door. I was shaking. I couldn't even open the door. So he reached over and pulled the handle for me to let me in. He let me in. We drove back to his place, and I thought we would go to a hotel. We drove back to his place. He sat there and we talked for a second because I thought it was going to be a wham bam thank you ma'am, but it a lot of times it wasn't. Even in my years of being in the sex industry, it was men that would pick me up just to have companionship, just to talk, just to hang out, whatever. So not every transaction was always sexual. Majority were, but not 100%. So I was thrown off by the fact that he was like, have a drink, let's talk. Who are you? What do you do? What do you like? And I'm like, what? But he was trying to make me comfortable, and I was getting comfortable until it was time to do. I thought, oh, we gonna play spades. Oh, he cool, but it obviously took a turn, and I remember that first transaction, and I just laid there. I don't even know how he got excited, because I didn't give no effort. I was just so in shock. I was in shock that this was happening. I was in disbelief. I felt like I was having an outer body experience. I couldn't wait for it to be over, and it was over pretty quickly. Amen. Thank you, Lord. And it was over, and he got back in the car. He took me back to where he picked me up. And I remember crying, walking back and forth, crying, hoping that another car wouldn't pull up, and another car pulled up, and another car pulled up. And, that was my first night.
Multiple sexual experiences your first night.
Yeah, I think 3 that night.
Wow.
What changed? Did something else change that night? Or were you already, at the point of numbness, from prior?
Yeah. She met me after the first one and gave me another line of coke to keep going. And so I went back out there, dried my eyes, I fixed my wig, I fixed my skirt, and I went back where I was at.
Eventually, was it even scary at some point? Like, did it ever just get normal, or was it scary every time?
I don't think it got normal until I got into the porn industry. But anytime there was a stranger in a car, you never get used to it. Anytime that I left the clubs, because once I departed from her, because she was straight prostitution. When I finally departed from her, because she had a pimp and all this other stuff, and I ain't never been no fool like that. If my baby daddy couldn't get me to do it, I'm sure not finna go with your dude, Right. So she was straight prostitution. And when those cars would pull up, it's almost like your heart would drop in your knees, because you don't know if is this gonna be the one? Is this gonna be the last one? Yeah. Is this gonna be the one? Either the condom. I used to be scared that condoms would break. About HIV and STDs. Also, is this Freaky Jason? Am I with Jeffrey Dahmer? Freddy Krueger or somebody picking me up? So every time the car pulled up, it's like I can hear my heart beat through my chest. And then once I departed from her, I went into the clubs because I couldn't, I wasn't no on the corner type chick. I did that for a minute, but that really wasn't my stilo. That really wasn't my thing. So I went back into the clubs. And I was comfortable with taking a man in the back room because I'm still within the confinement of the club. But then there were some that was like, no, I want you to go home with me. And then that fear will come back, like, I'm leaving with him. Am I going to be able to return back? So, no, it wasn't. Anytime you got in a car with a stranger, it's not a comfortable feeling.
So times have changed.
Oh, yeah.
And sex work is becoming, just people in general becoming more numb to it, and you will hear conversations, you'll hear it in the music, you'll see on TV. It's just like, this is just what some guys choose to do. They just choose to get prostitutes here and there, or some as a lifestyle all the time. And it's just doesn't seem like it's a big deal, in many of these circles, unfortunately.
It is.
Do you think that people, particularly men, matter of fact, men and women, have a fair understanding of what it's like to be involved in sex work?
I don't think you'll have an understanding until you experience it. From either side, whether you're a client that's involving yourself with prostitutes or you're a prostitute involving yourself with clients. Education is one thing, but experience is something totally different. I don't know the mind of a murderer because I ain't never killed nobody. I don't think I ever did nothing like that. You know what I'm saying? But I don't know the mind of a murderer because that's not nothing I walked in. But I know the mind of a prostitute because that's something I lived. I know the mind of somebody who was molested or raped. I know the mind of a teenage girl that gets pregnant because those are the shoes that I walked in. So unless you're experiencing it for yourself, I don't think you truly understand the detriment of it, the devastation of it, the fear of it, and the door that you open up.
And I'm glad you stated that. And I asked that because you will hear a lot of times where, people are speaking about, men specifically speaking about their experience with prostitutes. And even now, women now, too, with bringing another woman into the bedroom and that kind of deal. The way that it's spoken of is like, hey, this was a quality experience. I had a great time. This person was professional. They took care of me. They did what we paid them to do.
Yeah.
They seem to give me excellent service, and it seems like they're happy with the transaction. That's how, and it can make it seem like, hey,
it's no big deal.
It's no big deal. Like, she got some money, I got what I needed, and everything is all good. But to hear you on the other side and talk about the fear and the trauma that comes with every single transaction is, I think that's the actual reality of it.
And the emotional and mental that comes with that. Like, I don't know a girl who ever just is what was after the high is done. That's why most sex workers, male or female, are always in some type of substance abuse, whether it's alcohol or drugs.
It's hand in hand.
It's hand in hand because nobody, unless you are absolutely out of your mind, can do this sober-minded. It's because I always had to stay high, and I overdosed on ecstasy 3 times. I almost died 3 times. But I had to stay high because the reality of what I was doing would have took me out. There is nobody that I know in the industry, past, present, or probably even future, that can do this, get dressed, take a shower, put their clothes on, get in their car, drive to wherever they're going, and lay on their back with strangers in those type of transactions in a sober mind. Because the mental and emotional torment alone, forget, Freaky Jason picking you up and finna kill you, just what you have to deal with when you look in the mirror is a lot within itself. So I had to stay drunk. I had to stay high because emotionally and mentally it was too much to bear.
I think I'm happy you said that. I think that's a sign, because I think there's certain environments people put themselves in where they don't feel comfortable unless they're under some kind of substance. And that's always a red flag. Like some people, they may go out regularly. I know people that's like party promoters, even on that end, but they gotta make sure they under the influence of alcohol for them to have a good time. You may have friends that you have to be under some kind of influence to even be around this person comfortably, or they're going to be pissed off. Why you not smoking? Or why we not drinking? Right? So like if there's any environment where substance abuse is required for you to have a good time, or just for you to even be around or in that space, that says a lot about the type of environment that you in.
Absolutely.
I mean, that probably means that if you experience that same environment sober, you probably wouldn't even be there.
That part.
That's really what it is.
That part.
So now you are, which is crazy, because we just really overlooking the fact that everybody having sex with this woman at this point is completely committing a crime at this point. Like they're having sex with an underage woman over and over again.
And I'm sure prostitution was illegal at that time.
Yeah.
So,
I think it still is.
Prostitution is definitely.
Let me go ahead and Google that.
So it's
it's illegal.
Yeah.
So how does the transition from prostitution to porn now? How does that?
Okay.
Wait, hold tight. Did you see that lady in church again? Like did you go back to church after that?
I did not.
Okay. I was
not
wondering.
that particular church.
You couldn't.
Okay.
Was it? Did you just feel too guilty to go back, or?
I didn't go back to that church, but here's the thing. I was a HIPAA Christian. So, again, shout out to my grandparents for instilling Jesus in me. And I felt like no matter what type of life that I led, I still owed him his time. And so I would lead a club and go to church. I get out the bed with 2 chicks and go to church. I get out the bed with a married man and go to church. I go to some of the churches that the pastors were my clients. So I always kept God with me. I had got this tattoo of Jesus on the cross because I said, as long as I'm in hell, I got Jesus with me. I know it was crazy, right? But I felt like if I went to church, I was still giving God his time. And then it was a level of protection and reverence in some type of way. Like, even though I'm living like this, I'm still gonna give you your time, and gave him stripper money and everything. Well, the Bible say the wealth of the wicked is stored up for the righteous anyway. So I'll take my club money and put it in the offering. Because church was instilled in me. I couldn't go back to that church because my grandparents were there and I had ran away. I'm still ran away at this point. I'm still a runaway at this point in time. So I didn't go back to that church. But I found a couple of them to go and frequently go and go before I go to work.
See that, first of all, that's because me, I'm more on the type when we just had a conversation with a brother about this, because I spoke to a brother who hasn't been living right, and he was communicating that he hasn't been praying, he hasn't been going to church, and he hasn't been doing these things because he feels a level of guilt. You know, it's like he has this God guilt because he ain't been right. So now it's almost like he just MIA on God right now until he's really ready to get back in the rhythm. And I find myself to be quite similar. Like when I'm thinking about the times I was really deep in sin, there wasn't no praying and, wasn't no reading scripture. No, it's like, matter of fact, I see the Bible, I'm trying not to look at it. I'm trying to look away at the Bible. I don't even want to make eye contact with the Bible right now because I know what's really going down. So to think about,
I was complete opposite.
To think about you doing that is really, that's different to me.
Yeah, I was complete opposite. And even now I tell people as a pastor, as a leader, I tell people ain't no such thing as I'm gonna come to God when I get myself together, because you'll never get yourself together.
Yeah.
And what do you think Christianity is? Jesus came for the sinners. He came for the ones who are deep in sin, in alcoholism and perversion and sexual immorality, unforgiveness, bitterness, whatever, mental health issues. He came for you. I think the best time to come to church is when you're in it. So then he can come in. And that whole come as you are, first of all, it ain't biblical anyway. I can't find no scripture about it, but it is a saying, come as you are, but you shouldn't stay as you are. You can come as a crackhead. You can come as a prostitute. You can come as a whoremonger, a womanizer. And that's how he will accept you. But then you allow the relationship to transform you. When you're deep in sin, that should be I'm a go. Even though I'm living foul, even though I'm living wrong, I'm going to still give God his time, because even though I was a whole prostitute, I was a whole stripper, dope dealer at this point, gangbanger, all of that stuff, between the ages of, when did I start? Between ages of 14 was when I hit the club, up until 19 actually is when I really stopped. I was all of these things, and yet I stayed in church. And although someone would say, well, how could you go to church knowing the life that you live? But I'm glad I went to church because God was planting some type of seed in me. That's why in my church, we're non-judgmental. We're just Jesus. We're not traditional. We're transformational. We don't know religion. We know relationship, because my leaders, my armor bearers, everybody in my church know I don't care if she come in here with a bikini on. I don't care if he come in here smelling like crack and weed and whatever. We love on them. We pray for them. We show them all kind of love, because whether they come in here and then leave and go get high or go sleep around, there was something that they got while they were here. The Bible says, I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. That seed that was planted, somebody gonna come and water it. And then at the appointed time, God gonna give them the increase, and you don't know what's gonna come out of their life. So I don't believe in turning nobody away, and I don't believe in nobody turning themselves away because of something that they're struggling with at that time.
No, clearly understood that. Clearly understood. This testimony is so powerful, because I'm really putting myself, you paint such a vivid picture of what you was, experiencing. And now take me now to the height of this.
Okay.
Because I think porn was the height now.
Oh yeah.
Your story. Mm-hmm. How did we get there?
Okay. So I went back into the clubs. I'm stripping and I'm prostituting in the clubs. While I was there were some porn stars that came in, and I knew who they was, because the Saints be watching porn. So I knew they were famous porn stars, as well, heightened back in our day, very well known. They came in the club, and I called myself just saying, hey, I called myself just speaking to them like, hey girl, I know your work, what's up, and the conversation took a turn that ultimately changed my life. I said, hey, and one young lady looked me up and down. I mean, she looked me up and down. She examined me, and she said, have you ever considered doing porn? And I think I started cussing a little bit. I was like, no, absolutely not. And she said, why? You can make a lot of money. You think you making money now? You ain't seen nothing yet. And then she proceeds to tell me I made $30,000 from doing movies in 1 month. Now, mind you, this the early 2000s. Today,
it's a banger.
$30,000 in 1 month is still great money.
Absolutely.
Okay, so back then it was. So she said I made $30,000 from doing movies, and she said take my card. I was like, no, I ain't. I'll take your card, but I just didn't see that for me, right? Mm-hmm. Now, what had happened was I was a little rough around the edges. I told you I'm from Compton, right? So yeah. I would like be fighting. So I beat up a few of the girls in the club, right? And so the manager said, you gotta go. You up here beating up all my girls. How they gonna make money? You know, they black and blue. You fighting them like you Debo. You know what I'm saying? So I got fired from the strip club.
Wow.
I got fired from the strip club. I'm in my apartment like, what I'm going to do? I don't want to go back to no corner. I don't want to go back to no another club, whatever. What I'm going to do? I looked at my purse and I saw her card. I called her, and she invited me to a porn set. And I went. A couple of days later, I went to the porn set, and it was something that was out of a movie. Like it was something, it was so surreal. It was so like, almost like, what was the movie Scarface, Tony Montana, yeah. Women, New Jack City, how it was so surreal. I saw these big cameras, and I saw these producers with headphones on their head like ours. And I saw naked people all over the place in these big old mansions. And I see nothing but, Rolls Royces and Bentleys and Benzes out in the parking lot. And I'm just like, I'm blown away. And an agent was there, and she came up to me, and they made the introduction, and she said, I can get a lot of work for you. You young and this, that, and the third, you have a certain look. I can get you working as soon as you get your STD test back. You have to go to this place called AIM. You go there and you get tested every 30 days. And so she said, well, I'll make your, they'll pay for your test. Your first one, it's on them because they want to get you working. And so she set up my appointment to get me tested. Obviously, I was negative. And I was ready for my first scene.
Wow.
And again, that first, you never forget the first. It was the worst thing I had ever experienced. Because again, like most, I've seen porn many a times, but I never did it. So what we see, for all you porn addicts, what you see is the edited version.
Right.
You see the, final copy. You have no idea the in-betweens or what it took for her or him to do that, what was going on prior to when the camera was rolling. And so I got to see porn from the other side of the camera. And it was the worst experience of my life. I remember I couldn't walk. Because obviously, in order for woman can look any kind of way to do porn, but for a man, you have to be a certain size. You have, and most of them are extremely well endowed, like abnormal, like abnormal, like. Like, what is that? I had never experienced nothing like, Ryan, you laughing. I thought they were deformed. I had never experienced nothing like that in my life. And obviously porn is not a love making. Are you crying?
that caught me off guard. But I get what you're saying. That's what's required. That's what's required.
It's required to be well endowed. And when I tell you they were well endowed, and mind you, I'm 18. I'm 18, and although I'm not a virgin, although I have been privy to this sex work and prostitution, I'm dealing with average
Joes.
9 to 5 guys that ain't, mad at their wife, don't got nobody, just want to have a good night. I'm dealing with regular people. Now I'm on the set with half me and half horses. Okay.
Wow.
Obviously this ain't no gentle, let me make love to you. It's very rough. It's very aggressive. And it was just the worst. Like when you get on set, it's take your clothes off. You got about 5 to 10 people on set watching you interact. You meet the person on the set if you don't know them previous. Like, hey, how you doing? All right, come on, let's get on in this position. It was so uncomfortable physically for me. I remember after that scene, I couldn't walk. Like I couldn't do no work. I told the agent I'm jacked up. Like I can't do it. I remember soaking in Epsom salt and just like, what is going on? But when I saw that check,
wow,
I said, well, you know what? You got to take a Tylenol, an aspirin, an Advil or something. You have to get with it, because it was the biggest amount of money I had ever seen before. And I had did it on set for maybe 2 hours, because you go through hair and makeup, like they doll you all up. It's so wonderful until it's time to do the do. And I saw the check. I was done after the first scene, but then when she gave me my check, I was like, well, maybe I ain't done. And then after talking to people, they was like, well, you should have told them what your drug of choice was, and they would have loosened you up. So the next scene, it was like a candy store, whatever you wanted, whether it was alcohol, whether it was pills, coke, meth, heroin. They had needles on set,
Needles on set.
Yeah, they had they had dudes that were, I remember this warlock, he was a Satanist. So I'm saying, like, God protected me from so much. And when people are loose with their body and just laying with folks, soul ties are so real.
Absolutely.
And I had a soul tie with a warlock. He was a full Satanist in the bathroom doing a ritual before he came out to do a scene with me. It just
he was
so
one of the porn stars.
Yeah, doing a ritual in the bathroom. Yeah, I seen girls who didn't want to be there, but they pimps was outside making them do it. It wasn't what I had always thought it was gonna be.
That's savage.
Yeah,
savagery going on. You see all of that behind, and then on top of that, you got to have this emotionless sex on cue.
And almost like this level of professionalism about just sex.
You got to be professional.
Because it's interesting, because I met a young lady that worked in porn. And I remember her telling me she was just one of the people that was just like in the background. She wasn't having sex. She was like on the production crew. And I remember hearing her tell me about this. Funny thing was, she actually lived in LA too. And I remember hearing this, and I remember thinking already when she told me that, in my mind, I'm thinking something about her's off. Like, you're not well. Because to be in that environment,
it's so desensitized.
For work, like on a day-to-day, this is how I make my money. Something in you have to be
off,
a little off, for you to be comfortable in this environment. Absolutely. Or even accept to be in this environment. Did you notice that everybody there, not even just the sex workers, but was everybody there, did they have a weird spirit about them?
Everybody was Looney Tune. Everybody was crazy.
I can see that.
Everybody was, it was so demonic. From the production to the porn stars, it was so heavy. It was so dark. Pornography alone is demonic. It is a portal, and it is a setup to kill the sanctity of a marriage and the sexual union between a husband and wife. It distorts a man's image of a woman. It distorts a woman's image of a man. And that's just for the viewer. So can you imagine the producer and the actual actors that are doing it? The stuff that I witnessed, I remember, and it's probably going to be graphic, but the stuff that I saw with people bleeding and they'll do anal scenes, and again, this is rough and aggressive. I seen a piece of their bone from their anus, like their anus, it fell out. I'm sorry, I know it was graphic.
No, you have bones on there, I guess.
Yeah, like gristle or whatever it is, flesh falling out of their bodies, and yeah, it was bad. It was so traumatic.
I could only imagine.
And then you could be like, the producer be like, here go a towel, wipe up, because we about to shoot in 5 minutes. Like, it heartless, and
you cattle pretty much.
Yeah, like I got a scene to do. Hurry up. And they renting the mansions and renting the locations and stuff like that. And so it's like, we got this mansion for 12 hours, and we like, hurry up. The girls crying and puking in the bathroom. I'm seeing people throwing up, and hey, come on, we got just so desensitized, so on a whole nother. It's another world. But as demonic and dark as it was, I got paid the most money I ever seen in my life. And she was right. When I met her in that strip club, she said, if you think you're making money now, you ain't seen nothing yet. She's right. I made the money, but what it cost me did not compare to the checks that were being written to me. It reminds me of the scripture that I always say in every interview, every chance I get: what profit is it to a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? And that's exactly what was happening to me. My drug habit increased when I had mentioned earlier about me overdosing on ecstasy several times, 3 times. My depression, my drinking had increased. I remember I was in the industry at the time when the herpes and the HIV scare had came up. People were getting herpes and HIV, and you're supposed to get tested every 30 days. But what happens is, if you and I get tested, but then you're only supposed to be sleeping with your actors. But if you go down the street and sleep with Sarah and Becky and Tanisha infects you, you know what I'm saying? Then you come back to work with me, and now you're spreading it in the industry. So now the HIV had entered into the industry. So now I'm worried, like, am I going to get it? But yet still showing up the set.
Right.
Herpes it was a big outbreak, big herpes outbreak that hit the industry. I'm scared out of my mind, crying and praying. Had the audacity to be praying on set, Lord, please don't let me get nothing. Lord, please don't let nothing happen to me. And all this stuff. It was a lot. It was a lot. But she was right. I made the money. One of my best friends to this day, I had the privilege of baptizing her yesterday at our church. But we met in the porn industry. And I was the ghetto one. She was the bougie one. And her clientele was so different from mine. I'm used to just, regular people on the streets and in the clubs. And she knew the celebrities. And so she introduced me to celebrity clientele. So my livelihood had changed. Now I'm with rappers and football players and basketball players and mega preachers and all these, like, people that we listen to and we watch on TV are now booking me to come to their parties or having one-on-one sessions. And so the money increased even more. I was, traveling now. I was able to, I live the type of life, if you was my friend and I wanted to go on vacation for the weekend, you just meet me at the airport. I got us, like, bawling out of control and dying on the inside.
Okay, so let's talk about the powerful test. I'm so happy you are here with us, because it takes a hell of a person to make it through those things. It takes Jesus to make it through those things. So, okay, because it sounds like you super active with the porn. You getting these checks, and it sounds like the friend that introduced you, is that considered escort services? Is there like a difference between prostitution and escort services when I guess you're dealing with a higher level of clientele?
It's still it's prostitution.
Okay.
I couldn't say prostitution for years.
Okay.
It don't look the same. So in my mind, and most people, they think of a prostitute, they think of what I was talking about, standing on the corner.
Streetwalker. Right.
When they think of an escort, that's when it's like, it's a different level. It's a different dynamic, but it's still prostitution at the end of the day, whether it's high class or not.
Okay. I was like, because prostitution not happening on IG.
Yeah.
Ladies now with these real nice IGs, you got dudes DMing them and
with
having them pretty
fans
much come over. OnlyFans.
That's prostitution.
It's all prostitution.
That's an excellent concern. So, I guess the question is, are there things that women do right now that if you asked them, are you a prostitute? They would say, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And so what are those things?
Anytime that there's a transaction or an exchange for anything sexual in return for anything of monetary gain, a bag, a car, a bill paid, groceries, if you're willing to exchange sex for something back, that is prostitution. I don't care if you're doing it on a low level or on a high level like me in porn, being in the porn industry. If you sleeping with Mr. Joe so you can get your light bill paid, if you sleeping with Tom to make sure you got groceries and gas, that's prostitution.
Now, what about the ladies who say, well, I'm not sleeping with him? They
What
might
they
not be sleeping with him, but they might be doing the late night phone calls. They might be, some women say, they get those things, they get their bills paid, and maybe they are sleeping with, I don't know. But they may claim that I'm not sleeping with them.
Anything sexual, whether it's conversation, because phone sex is a thing too.
Right.
Anything sexual in exchange for monetary gain in any form is prostitution.
Wow.
It's prostitute, no matter how. And I know it's hard for them to say that. And hard to admit that because, again, like you said, it's so accepted now with the social media, the OnlyFans and all of those things. It's so accepted and it's so like, oh, it's not a bad thing. But no, it is. It really is. And I know it's hard for them. It's a hard pill to swallow, but
Right. You talk to some folks right now.
Yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow, sis.
So, Pastor, I want you to continue to talk about this because you mentioned at these different levels where you're advancing in this dark reality that money at these different stops, money was a major motivator. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to kind of get an idea, why was money your major motive? Was it giving you a certain lifestyle that you just really admired? Was it getting you access to things that you really wanted? Or was it something a bit deeper behind your motivation for having money? Or was it just flat out, first it was survival, and then it turned into, I just want to live a life of luxury? Like, why was money such a catalyst in these decisions that you was making?
I think in general, regardless to what anybody is in, money is the pool for anybody. Even if you work at McDonald's, if you're on the fry machine making $10 an hour, but they say, hey, I want you to work the register making $15 an hour. That's going to be the motivation. If you're on the register making $15 an hour and then they present a manager position at $22 an hour, it's the money that's going to pull you. You don't really want to do the work, but you want the money. And so I think when I saw the amount of money and, like you said, a life of luxury, survival, I had become used to it now. Because remember, I started this at 14. I'm now 18.
Right.
And so it just graduated. The saying is levels to this. So I had reached another level. And one thing about flesh, you can never feed it enough. Flesh is never satisfied.
Yeah.
And so no matter how much money I made, if there was an opportunity for more, just like somebody with a sex addiction, no matter how much sex you had, after a few hours, you done came down at about 9:00, I can have some more sex because flesh can never be satisfied. It's always hungry. It's never full. And so for me, I'm now fully submerged in the devil's camp. And so, yeah, I saw a little money at 14 in the strip club when I was there for a minute. I saw a little money in the prostitution with the choir member. I saw a little money when I left her and went back to the club to strip and do prostitution. But I seen a little bit more money in the porn industry. Then saw a little bit more money when my clients became famous. And so it just became something that I just kept going after.
I want to ask this because this was a big part here. You said you started even servicing mega pastors.
Mm-hmm.
Did that change how you saw the church or just, leaders in those roles when you started seeing, pastors even, in that world?
I don't think it changed my perception on church. The problem is, I think that we blame a perfect God for imperfect people. So what man does, or what females do, what humans do, has nothing to do with God. God gave us something I call a blessing and a curse, and that's free will. It's a blessing to have free will, and it's a curse to have free will, because we can do whatever we want and we don't always make the right decisions. So when preachers were my clients, I didn't view God or the church in a negative way. I just viewed them like, oh, okay, you ain't who you say you are. You're not who you present yourself to be. And so anything negative that I felt was towards that person, not to the church in general. And I wish somebody who is screaming church hurt, that have left church because of your one experience with an imperfect person. We don't generalize a whole organization because of your one bad experience. We don't punish God because of your one bad experience with a not so great pastor or a not so great usher in the church. Now you just done with God and you're done with church in a whole because of one experience. How did God ain't got nothing to do with you over there with Deacon Dirty. God ain't got nothing to do with what Prophet Picklehead did. We got free will, and so I thank God that I had spiritual maturity to know how to separate the two.
What about, just in general, men?
I'm trying to figure out who the pastor is. Who was they got you under contract now? We need to
we
need to bring this.
Hit the drum roll now.
It was multiple. It wasn't just
multiple?
one. Yeah, it was multiple.
Are they still pastors to this day?
Yes, famous ones.
Wow.
Yeah.
What, in general, okay, so because I know, we've talked about how you feel about, church leadership, but in general, men who absolutely desire you, willing to pay thousands of dollars to spend some hours with you, maybe less than that, but then will turn around and publicly you scum of the earth. Have you reconciled that at all, or did you reconcile with that? Like, or what are your general thoughts about because I think that would probably be the average man. They gonna absolutely, shame you, but also try to sleep with you.
Yeah, that is definitely a reality. Which is just like homosexual preachers that preach against homosexuality, but they gay on the low. You know what I'm saying? So that's just a reality. There are people who watch porn and have addictions to porn, but they'll condemn it in the pulpit. And there are people who would sleep with me right now today if I say let's go. They'd be ready to go. I couldn't even get it out. I couldn't even get it off my lips all the way before they pants is around their ankles. Okay,
just after your testimony,
you hear me? And then we'll turn around and get into on social media, or they'll get in their pulpit and say, that is just, I just can't receive that. God can never use somebody that had went so low, So a lot of times what you condemn is what you play with. A lot of times what you condemn is what you play with.
I feel like that's all the time. I 1000% agree with you.
You hear me?
Yeah.
And so I think I'm just such a mature person, and I have thick skin that a lot of stuff rolls off my back. But that is a reality where there are some preachers, leaders, people watching, people who will come across my story. And once they find out, like, she did that, she was a prostitute, she was in the porn industry, anything demeaning, all these demeaning things that I got myself involved in on a public platform, they'll say, oh, that's so nasty, that's so low down, that's so degrading. But in a private sector, they'll be trying to see, because my testimony, and a lot of pastors don't allow me in their pulpit because my testimony exposes. And a lot of preachers are dealing with sexual immoral sins.
Yeah.
And so they will shun me from coming to their pulpit because I don't want you to preach on what I play with. I don't want you to condemn what brings me comfort. I don't want you to send me, talk about the bad stuff, the behind the scenes of what I enjoy. And so there are a lot of leaders who would condemn what I do or don't, my peers don't really accept me because of where I came from. But in private, it would be a whole different story because I experienced that.
Oh, I can only, we probably got to talk about that in a second too.
Yeah.
So, okay. Powerful testimony is like, we got to take these little short breaks because it's a lot to digest.
Let it breathe.
We got 1,500 people in the chat. If you're joining us right now, we got Danielle McCord. I mean, she's going crazy right now. Unreal testimony, taking us from the streets to the pulpit, and we still not just there yet. Pastor, you live in a high life. Mm-hmm. You got these high end clients.
The low life.
Low life. Come on here.
Right. Living the low life. And you dealing with, all kinds of people getting you in rooms that you had never been in.
Right.
And, what is after that? After you getting this money, the porn, the escort services, what comes next?
Let me say this because a lot of people ask, well, you said that you saw a warlock doing a ritual. You saw girls crying. You saw people's flesh fall out. You saw STDs and drugs and abuse in the porn industry. Why didn't you get out? Why didn't you leave prostitution? Why didn't you leave the strip club when you saw the things and experienced the things? And when I was in the streets, I had been raped, I've been robbed, I've been followed, all that type of stuff, followed home from clubs, all the things that you can think of that will happen to a girl in that life have happened to me. I had pimps chase me down in the streets and all kind of stuff. And the number one question I get is, why didn't you get out? So let me answer that. The reason why I kept going is because I didn't feel like there was anything else that I could do. I thought that, the saying, you can't turn a hoe into a housewife. I heard all of the remarks about no man will respect me and you'll never be nothing and all that. And so those words that were planted in my spirit, they grew. And I started to believe the lies of the enemy that this is all that I'm going to ever be able to do. I had no education at this point. I dropped out of high school in 10th grade. I've been doing this since I was 14 years old. Now I'm doing movies. I hear people tell me that you'll never be this, you'll never be that. Who will take you serious? This is the lowest you can go. And I believe that. So my mindset said, if I'm going to be a hoe, I'm going to be the best one at it. If I'm going to be in the sex industry, I'm going to give it my all, because what else is there for me to do? I didn't think that there was something else for me. I had no education. I had no work experience. So this is all I know from a child of 14 years old to now 18, 19. This is all I knew. And I had men that would demean me because, again, I met all kind of people, and some of them like you. They like you. They like your time. They like your presence. They want to spend time with you. And then when things would get serious and I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe I can move into a relationship, they'll shut me down with the who what makes you think that I would be with a woman like you? And so wow. it would make me feel like there's nothing else for me to do. So I became good at what I did. My exit plan was to just do it until my body gave out, until I was too old to do it, and then marry somebody that was financially stable. And even in my marriage, I'll still be a prostitute because I married for money. And that was there was no escape goal, because I didn't feel like there was any value or any worth outside of what I was. Okay. So now I'm 19 years old, celebrities, traveling, shopping, living however, I want. As a result of my lifestyle, men would fly me out all the time. There was this one particular man who contacted me online, and he flew me on a one-way ticket from Los Angeles to JFK. And I'm high. I ain't paying no attention. I only got a one-way ticket. I'm out of my mind anyway. He flew me from LA to New York. And this man, he wined and dined me like the first couple of days. Everything he told me online was a lie. From the car he drove to the house he lived in, it was a lie. But he had a little money on him from wherever, and he took me out. We went shopping. We got drugs. We did our thing. We ended up going to a club this particular night in Manhattan. I'm there as a prostitute, so this is work for me. For him, it was something a little different. I guess in his mind, you my lady. For me, I'm gonna get as much money as I can while I'm in New York. Right. Yeah, my first time in New York, I'm finna go hit every borough and get me $1. You are
networking.
I'm networking. I'm networking. And so we end up going to a club, and he goes to the bathroom. I start talking to another gentleman because I'm here for work. This is not personal. He comes out of the bathroom. He sees me talking to this gentleman, and it infuriated him. He snatches me out of the club, throws me in his car, and he said something to me that shook me to my core. Now, mind you, Ryan, I just told you, being in the streets, I've had pimps chase me. I've had dudes do all kind of stuff. I've been raped. I've been jumped. I've been through a lot. But when he said this to me, I knew that something had changed. He said, "You're not going to leave here." And when he said it to me, it was just like, all right, I'm in trouble now. So he took me to a house. I'm from LA. We don't got basements. He took me to this house, and it had a basement. I never seen a basement before. And it looked like a dungeon. And it was a room in the basement. And it looked like something out of a horror movie. And he began to beat me. He raped me. He was a man from the island, so he was into voodoo. And he started chanting over me. And he kept me locked up in this basement. I was only supposed to be in New York for like 3 days. I was in this basement for almost 3 weeks. Wow. And for 3 weeks, I was being beaten. I was being raped. I was being put spells on and all kind of stuff. And he told me that he was going to kill me, and I believed him. I heard it before. I've been in situations before. But this time, when they say your life flashes before your eyes, it does, in a sense. Like, you get this eerie feeling like this is it. And I just knew after his enjoyment of the torture, because some people get off on, torturing you and stuff like that. I said, once he gets over the fantasy or the enjoyment of torturing me, the next step would be for him to kill me. Because even the setup looks like he had done this before. And because, going back to what we said, I stayed in church even though I lived the life that I lived. And I'm glad I did, because even though I was a prostitute, even though I was a stripper, even though I was in the porn industry and on drugs and selling dope and all that, I'm glad I went to church, because there were seeds that were being planted in me. And while I was in this man's basement, something in me said, pray. And I prayed like I never prayed before. And I said, Lord, if you get me out of this, I'll change my life for you. Just don't let me die. And I said that before. And I'm sure a lot of people will say that when they get in a situation. He said, God, get me out. God gets us out. And we return back to it, which I have done many a times. But I knew this time that had I made it out of this basement, I was done. I said that prayer. And 3 days later, his friend came down the stairs. I thought it was him. He came down the stairs of the basement looking for the guy. And he found me. And when he opened up the door and saw me and saw the condition that I was in, mind you, this is a three-week span.
What condition were you in, by the way?
I looked like somebody crazy. I had been beaten. I'd been raped. I had, barely fed. I just looked like somebody out of my mind.
Yeah.
An abused person. And so he looked like he saw a ghost. This your partner. And then you go to his house and then you see me in the closet. You gonna be like, what's going on? You scared. Like, wait, and this was his friend. So he's looking like, what is going on? So I don't know if he's part of the plan. I don't know if he witnessed. I don't know what's going on. I just tell the man what's happening and if he can help me. And he did. He helped me get out the basement. Everybody that knows about the tri-state area, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey are all connected. I knew somebody in Jersey. So all I needed him to do was get me from New York to Jersey, which I did. Friend of mine there got me a one-way ticket back to LA. And that was my breaking point. That was my out. That was my exodus. Most people get saved and delivered at a revival, a conference, or a Sunday morning at the altar. I got saved and delivered in a New York basement, because I had made a vow to God. If you save me, I'll change my life. When I got back to LA, that's exactly what I did.